Welcome back to our series on Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem, In Memoriam, AHH, an elegiac sequence of great scope written in honor of his friend Arthur Henry Hallam, whom Tennyson lost when they were both young. This was the decisive fact of his life, so deep was the love that he bore his friend. It seems particularly appropriate in this pandemic for us to try to gain a vision from a great poet who is feeling his way in the dark, as we are ourselves. This whole YouTube channel is dedicated to the proposition that poetry, in good times and in bad, is a thing that we should go to try to have our hearts opened up and our minds expanded so that we might see and feel things that we could not see and feel otherwise. A little recap about Tennyson. He was the towering poet of the Victorian age. He lived from 1809 to 1892. He lost his friend Arthur Hallam in 1833. He kept adding to this almost 3,000 line poem over the course of 17 years. We are looking today at Cantos 4, 5, and 6. Canto 4. To sleep I give my powers away. My will is bondsman to the dark. I sit within a helmless bark, and with my heart I muse and say, O heart, how fares it with thee now, that thou shouldst fail from thy desire, who scarcely darest to inquire, what is it makes me beat so low? Something it is which thou hast lost, some pleasure from thine early years. Break, thou deep vase of chilling tears, that grief hath shaken into frost. Such clouds of nameless trouble cross all night below the darkened eyes. With morning wakes the will and cries, thou shalt not be the fool of loss. This is a somewhat strange poem. We ask ourselves first, in considering it, who is speaking? Who is this I? Because we have the lyric voice being in the first person. To sleep I give my powers away, my will. So we now have a kind of dissociation here. And then I, whoever that is, has a conversation with my heart. I sit within a helmless bark, and with my heart I muse and say. The I interrogates the heart in sleep. O heart, how fares it with thee now, that thou shouldst fail from thy desire? So the question is, why is it that you've lost heart, my heart? What is it makes me beat so low? The heart is supposed to ask itself. And that's a great line. What is it makes me beat so low? There's obviously the notion of the heart beating and beating weakly, anemically. But here we also must, I think, sense the resonance of wings beating. Why is this angel heart grounded? Why is this heart not soaring the way it ought to? Why is desire not causing this person to reach beyond himself? And the answer is, something it is which thou hast lost, some pleasure from thine early years. And here I want to make a note about meter. We noted in the previous lectures that this is iambic tetrameter. One would, by the book, scan this unstressed break thou, deep vase of chilling tears. As I noted before, you're not going to read it like that. You're not going to say break thou, deep vase of chilling tears. In fact, there's in this line, it's almost required that we have 4 stresses in a row. Break thou, deep vase of chilling tears, which is to indicate the anguish of the speaker. The notion here is a little funny, I think. Maybe I don't understand the mechanics of it, but Tennyson comments, water can be brought below freezing point and not turn into ice if it be kept still, but if it be moved suddenly it turns into ice and may break the vase. That's the conceit here. He gets this notion from Goethe, it seems. In the Christopher Ricks edition of the poems of Tennyson, we have this note that Goethe was an authority for linking spiritual with physical or scientific evolution. In any case, the image seems to be something like the chilling tears have filled his heart, have congested it so much, and grief has shaken it solid. So the heart is this leaden weight, and might as well just break the heart, and maybe that would get things going again. Then this eye, this mysterious eye that's overlooking the will that's gone to sleep and is interrogating the heart in sleep. This eye looks down and says that the clouds are below the darkened eyes. It's hard to know exactly where the viewpoint is. And then this eye tells us that when morning wakes, the will cries out, "Thou shalt not be the full of loss." So this is a declaration of vim and vigor. This is everything's going to be different today. It's an interesting little canto. Canto 5. I sometimes hold it half a sin to put in words the grief I feel. For words like nature half reveal and half conceal the soul within. But for the unquiet heart and brain, a use in measured language lies. The sad mechanic exercise like dull narcotics numbing pain. In words like weeds I'll wrap me o'er, like coarsest clothes against the cold. But that large grief which these enfold is given an outline and no more. In my own life, writing poetry kept me afloat in very straitened circumstances. And it is, in fact, this use of meter, which can be so calming and such a gainful employment for the spirit, the sad mechanic exercise of beating out the measures, right? For me, I used Shakespeare's sonnets as I was reading them, and that really, it kick-started at a very late age my beginning as a poet. I sometimes hold it half a sin to put in words the grief I feel. So despite the consolation that one can get from writing poetry, there is still the question that a writer often has to face. How true am I being to reality with the words that I am using? Words like nature half reveal and half conceal the soul within. So he seems to be setting up an analogous proportion. You've got words as the expression of the soul, and soul seems to be a shared term. Nature expresses the soul, and it must be something like the Platonic notion of, the Neoplatonic notion of the world soul is being expressed in nature. And in both cases, the soul speaking in words and the world soul speaking in nature, what is being revealed is but half, and still more, still half is concealed. The next stanza, you got another place to note something about meter, but for the unquiet heart. You could have two unstressed, that would be acceptable in iambic, but most likely what we got is an elision here, that the and un are being said as one, and that's the way I read it. But for the unquiet, now as I've noted before, you don't need to read it according to the meter, but I don't think it's a stretch or artificial to read it this way, but for the unquiet heart and brain. But these are not necessarily hard and fast. You could just read before the unquiet heart and brain. In words like weeds, I'll wrap me o'er. So this is carrying on that notion, the analogous proportion here. The soul is wrapping itself with words like weeds. Now the weeds could be widow's weeds. It's the mourning garment. Tennyson is in mourning. But it's also the world is covering itself in weeds. And In both cases, the individual soul and the world soul, there is that large grief, which is at the heart of both souls, and that is being both revealed and concealed in the words and in nature. Very effective canto. Canto 6. One writes that other friends remain, that loss is common to the race, and common is the commonplace, and vacant chaff well meant for grain. That loss is common would not make my own less bitter, rather more. Too common, never morning wore to evening, but some heart did break. We'll stop here and reflect. When we tell people who are in mourning, look, you've got other friends, you've lost one, but you've got others, or you've lost, but everybody loses something precious. And he's saying, that's loss is common, and that's a very common thing to say, meaning it's not noble. It's a cliche, and a cliche doesn't advance the spirit. It doesn't foster attention to the true. It's vacant chaff, even if it was meant as wholesome grain. And then he notes, if in fact it is the case that loss is common, that doesn't make it consoling. That makes the fact even more bitter, that when I lose the dearest one to me, and then I'm told, well, everybody loses something precious, that if one isn't letting grief do what it often does, is that closes us in on ourselves. If in fact it's opening our heart to the suffering, that large grief that is in the world, at the foundation, at the core of the world, then to know that in this loss of my own, in fact, I am not different from others, that anguish is part of the human condition. That doesn't make me feel better about my loss. I see in that loss, I feel in that loss, it's an iconic gateway to the bleeding heart of all the world. Never morning wore to evening, but some heart did break. We go on. O Father, wheresoe'er thou be, who pledgest now thy gallant son, a shot, ere half thy draught be done, hath stilled the life that beat from thee. O Mother, praying God will save thy sailor, while thy head is bowed, his heavy shotted hammock shroud drops in his vast and wandering grave. The father's drinking the health of his son, and before he gets the drink down, his son is shot on a battlefield far away. And then he has that very poignant line, the life that beat from thee has been stilled. He's conjuring this image of a heart from heart, this procession of generations, heart of my heart, the life that beat from thee, but also again the wings, that this, like the fledgling child you push out into the world, that little child flew away and was shot down. And then the mother who is praying to God that her son be safe, even as she's praying, his shroud weighted down with cannonballs is being dropped into the ocean. This is it's almost a Thomas Hardy level of darkness and despair. Tennyson is a believer, but he does not gloss over the difficulties that faith must confront. He is putting this in the most anguished scenario. You've got a person praying with all her heart for a good thing, a selfless thing, for the protection of her son. Presumably this is what God wants too, the protection of all of his children, and yet in the very moment of the prayer is being denied. Even believers are aware that these things happen, so we do have to look it squarely in the face and see what faith can say about such bad synchronicities. The synchronicity that really is at the heart of this poem is reported by his son, that Tennyson was writing Arthur Hallam in the hour that Hallam died, suffered his cerebral hemorrhage in Vienna. So this reality is clearly overwhelming to Tennyson, and it's at the core of this poem. Ye know no more than I, who wrought at that last hour to please him well, who mused on all I had to tell, and something written, something thought, expecting still his advent home, and ever met him on his way with wishes, thinking, here today, or here tomorrow will he come. So you, O Father, you, O Mother, know no more than I, who wrought at that last hour of Arthur Hallam's life to please him well, to writing a letter in a way that was winsome. I, who mused on all I had to tell, my friend, and written some of it down and still kept some in my mind, even as I expected his return home. Then he moves on to kind of close the parenthesis with a reference to his sister Emily, who is betrothed to Hallam, but dresses it up in a kind of romantic setting. So what we're left with in this poem is only one straight up historical reference, that is Tennyson's own synchronicity, where he's writing as his friend is dying. Oh, somewhere meek, unconscious dove, that sittest ranging golden hair, and glad to find thyself so fair, poor child that waitest for thy love. For now her father's chimney glows in expectation of a guest, and thinking this will please him best, she takes a ribbon or a rose. For he will see them on tonight, and with the thought her color burns, and having left the glass, she turns once more to set a ringlet right. And even when she turned, the curse had fallen, and her future lord was drowned in passing through the ford, or killed in falling from his horse. He's distanced this scene, this young woman waiting for her beloved, her fiancé, and it doesn't matter that how this man actually dies. This is just the moral of the thing, as it were. And he ends, oh, what to her shall be the end, and what to me remains of good? To her perpetual maidenhood, and unto me no second friend. And again, this is a little distancing for Emily, because Emily in fact goes on to marry someone else, so she's not a perpetual maiden. We're left with Tennyson, who has no second friend. We will continue this series. There are 131 cantos in all, with the prologue and the epilogue besides, so it's a long journey, but I find that each little poetic drama that we are presented with here in the cantos, it's a new world, and it takes our hearts into places that we would not have been able to go by ourselves. So I hope you continue to join me on this journey, and thank you very much. Remember to click like and subscribe, and I will see you soon.